Ever notice how some things just, I don't know, send shivers down your spine, even when you know they're not really a threat? Like you're watching a scary movie, right? And it's that cliche scene, creaking coffin, maybe a skeletal hand popping out of the ground. Total cliche, but still gets ya. It's like this primal fear just kicks in, and I've always wondered, why is that? Well, on today's deep dive, we're tackling that fear head on. Fear of death. But we're not hanging out in the graveyard, no way. We're exploring this through the lens of Spiritism, which offers a really unique perspective, I think. We're checking out excerpts from Who is Afraid of Death by Richard Simonetti.
Yeah, he's a pretty prominent figure in the spiritist world, so this book gives a good insight.
Right, and it promises to give us a whole new way to look at something that's, let's be honest, kind of freak people out for, well, forever.
I mean, the whole idea behind Spiritism, for anyone who's new to it, is that our spirits, they don't just disappear when our bodies do. It's not about ghosts and Ouija boards, really. It's more about understanding how life continues after the physical body is gone.
Exactly. And Simonetti's main point right off the bat is that the more we actually understand about death, the less we're afraid of it. He uses this analogy in the book, really stuck with me. Imagine you're in a dark room, right? And there's this shadowy figure, you're terrified, heart's pounding. Then, bam, the lights come on, and it's just a coat rack.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, and poof, the fear's gone. That's what he's trying to do here, shine a light on the whole mystery of death.
It's true. So many of our fears, they come from not knowing. Simonetti argues that by, bringing in knowledge, we can take away the power those fears have over us. And that's where Spiritism is kind of cool. It gives us a framework, a way to make sense of what happens when we die.
So we're not just left with this big, scary question mark.
Right. It acknowledges that we are curious about the afterlife.
Yeah.
And instead of spooky stories, it offers explanations.
Okay, so let's turn on the lights, so to speak. One of the first things Simonetti dives into is this idea of the perispirit.
Which is essentially our spiritual body, right?
Yeah, and he says it's key to understanding how spiritists view death.
It's like, imagine a peach. You've got the pit, the fleshy part, and the skin.
Okay, I'm following.
The pit, that's the spirit, the real you, the core. The skin, that's your physical body, temporary, eventually got to go.
Makes sense.
And the fleshy part, the perispirit, that's the connection. That's what lets us keep going after we die.
So it's not like when the body stops, our consciousness just blips out of existence.
Nope, not according to this. Simonetti's saying the perispirit, this energy body we have, that's what lets us persist. It holds our essence, memories, personality.
Actually, that's kind of comforting when you think about it. It reminds me of something else he talks about. Near-death experiences, NDEs.
Oh, he even mentions that doctor.
Dr. Raymond Moody.
Yes, he studied people who basically died, clinically speaking, but were brought back.
And the thing is, a lot of them, no matter their background or beliefs, they all described similar things.
Seeing a light, feeling at peace. Some even saw loved ones who'd already passed.
Wild, right?
It does kind of line up with the whole spiritist view that death is more of a transition.
It's like getting a sneak peek behind the curtain. Makes you wonder what happens to that perispirit when we die.
Oh, it's not like it just pops out ready to go.
Yeah.
Simonetti, he actually gets into the nitty-gritty of what he calls the disconnection.
The disconnection.
Yeah, how the perispirit separates from the physical body.
Okay, yeah.
And thankfully, it's not that instant, painful thing some people imagine.
Woo, that's a relief. Because I've always wondered about that, like what that moment of separation would actually feel like.
He says it's a gradual thing, this disconnection. It's not like the second the heart stops,
Yeah.
boom, perispirit's out of there. There's a transition, a sort of gentle unraveling, not a harsh split.
I bet that makes a huge difference in the experience. But it kind of makes you wonder, what's guiding this whole gradual process? Does it just happen on its own?
So this is where Simonetti brings in this idea of specialized spirits.
Specialized spirits.
Yeah, beings who've already made that transition, from physical to spiritual, and now they help others going through it.
Oh, wow. Like a welcoming committee for souls.
Exactly. They're guides, companions, helping ease that disconnection process, providing comfort, reassurance, support, all that.
Makes sense. I know if I was going through a huge change like that, having a friendly face around would be nice.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Simonetti says the state of mind we're in when we die, it actually affects how this all goes down.
What, like, if we're stressed versus at peace?
Kind of. Think of it like packing for a trip, right? If you've lived your life carrying around negativity, fear, attachment, that's heavy baggage.
Oh, I feel that.
But if you focus on love, kindness, understanding, it's like packing light. makes the journey easier.
Wow, that is a powerful analogy. It's like what we do here, it really does matter, not just for this life, but for what comes after.
Exactly. And
Okay.
Simonetti talks about how this relates to the way people die. Someone super focused on possessions, on themselves, they might have a harder time letting go than someone who's nurtured their spiritual side, you know?
So it's not about judging how someone died, accident, illness, whatever. It's that their spiritual readiness plays a part.
Right. And he talks about prayer, too.
Hmm.
Not as a magic solution, but like preparation, mentally and emotionally.
Getting in the right headspace?
Yeah. And something really comforting he mentions is that even people who weren't super spiritual in life, they still get help during this transition. No one's just left to figure it out alone.
That's good to hear. I
Yeah.
think a lot of us have those, what if I haven't been good enough moments?
Totally. And Simonetti tackles that head on,
Hmm.
like the fear of being buried alive, right?
Yeah. Little irrational these days, but still.
He says it connects to a deeper fear of death itself.
Makes you realize those irrational fears, they come from somewhere.
Exactly. And sometimes just getting where they're coming from can help. Like, he talks about how we shouldn't overwhelm kids with scary death stuff. It just creates more fear.
Oh, for sure. Instead of hiding it, have those healthy conversations.
Right. And that goes for how we deal with, like, funerals and stuff. It's about respecting the person's spirit, not clinging to the physical body so much.
The body's just a vessel, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Shift the focus away from that physical ending and more towards the idea that the spirit keeps going.
So we've talked about the transition itself, but what about the big question? What happens after? What's on the other side?
Right.
Like pearly gates, harp music, or what? What are we working with here?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Simonetti, coming from the spiritist view, it's interesting. He doesn't really buy into that whole heaven or hell thing.
Really?
Yeah, he's more about, it's not so much going to a place as it is like aligning with a state of being.
State of being.
Okay, it's like this. Think about positive emotions, love, compassion. Those have a high vibration, right? Light.
Okay, yeah.
But negativity, fear, that's a lower vibration, kind of drags us down. Simonetti's saying that vibration, it plays a part in where we end up after death.
So it's like attracts like even in the afterlife?
Exactly. We live a good life focused on kindness, growth, all that. We're naturally drawn to a realm that matches that.
Makes sense.
But, and this is important, he's not saying it's God punishing anyone. It's more about we're always growing, learning, and we gravitate towards what's in line with our vibration.
That actually makes a lot of sense. It's not about like earning our spot in heaven. It's about living in a way that prepares us for whatever comes next.
That's the heart of it. Simonetti wants us to think about how what we do today, it echoes into the afterlife.
So, okay, big question then. What do we do with this information? How do we actually live differently knowing this?
Well, he's got some surprisingly practical advice, actually. One thing he talks about is submission.
Submission. It sounds kind of passive.
I know, right? But he doesn't mean blind obedience or anything. It's more like making peace with the natural order,
Yeah.
you know? We don't choose how we're born, and we don't really get to choose how we die either.
It's about accepting the journey as it unfolds.
Exactly. He tells this story, really beautiful, about a rabbi whose sons die. Tragic. And as the rabbi's wife is about to tell him, she thinks of this analogy, returned jewels.
Return jewels.
She says God entrusted them with these precious jewels, their sons, for a while, and now it's time for those jewels to be returned.
Wow. That puts such a different spin on loss.
Right. It's not just an ending.
It's like love continues even when someone's physically gone.
And Simonetti, he gets into practical stuff too, like
Wait.
organ donation. He sees it as a real act of charity, helping others even after we're gone.
Shows how our spirit can keep giving, even then.
And he talks about supporting loved ones who are dying, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually.
That's tough, though, knowing what to do for someone in that position.
He says just be there. Listen without judgment. Maybe even have those life review conversations. Let the person share their stories, process things.
Helps them and everyone who loves them find peace.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging that even in saying goodbye, there's this continuation of the spirit, something beyond the physical.
This whole deep dive has been, wow, eye-opening for sure, but surprisingly comforting, too.
Simonetti really gives you a different way to think about death, doesn't he?
He does, and it's not just about the afterlife. It's about how we live now.
Totally.
He has this proverb in the book, I love it. Live your life so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. Really makes you think, what kind of mark do we want to leave behind? For anyone listening who, wants to explore this more, I highly recommend Simonetti's Who is Afraid of Death. Really gets you thinking. And that's it for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep those big questions coming.